This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Our goal with our videos is to empower you to be able to do the repairs on your own and save a whole lot of money and also get that great feeling of having fixed it by yourself. Here's some of the things that can help you with cleaning your dryer. This is a lint brush you can get from Amazon. You need a standard head and Phillips head screwdriver and a couple little brushes like this. Even an old toothbrush would work. Also, you could use a vacuum with a small attachment, could help too. So this is on a Frigidaire Gallery dryer. We've got it unplugged. We're just using the standard head screwdriver to pop these little clips. You can see they're about maybe 3 inches in from each side, and you can lift up the top. And then we're going to disconnect two modular connectors. They're really easy to disconnect. You just kind of pinch in, pull them apart, and they're bringing power to the timer there on the front of the dryer, but you do have to disconnect these. We're going to try and take off this front panel, and there's basically just two Phillips head screws holding on the panel. They're located on the left side here and on the right side about 5 inches down, so it's kind of hard on this one to see what I'm doing, but hopefully you can get your head in there and see better. Once those screws are out, you can just pull this panel towards you. And you have to lift it up off of two clips that are in the bottom left and bottom right hand corner. This is going to give you really good access then to be able to reach in and clean out a bunch of the lint that builds up. The lint typically builds up over the years, but it can catch on fire and sometimes does even cause house fires. This area down here on the front area, this round part, you want to reach in and clean really well. That's where a lot of lint shows up and it blocks the airflow. This is the dryer vent that sometimes comes out on the side of your house. On this one it's kind of underneath a deck. I'm going to use this brush tool that I got from Amazon with my drill. I'm going to go in there and drill out a bunch of times to get all that lint out of that vent tube. If you can get all that out, that makes a huge difference in how well your dryer works and dries, and also reduces the chance of there being a fire. So it's really important to do this even more than once a year. And if you have a long vent hose, let's say 20 feet or more, you want to do it probably every 3 months. It really makes a difference. Easy to do, and it's a really cool tool. You can use, I'll have it in the links below in the description, so it's pretty easy to get a hold of it. And they're pretty cheap. I think they're about maybe $30, but really helps. Okay, now we are going to also remove this big old tumbler. We're going to reach in on both sides, and we're going to pull the idler wheel to the side and then pull the belt off of the pulley, and then we're going to lift up on the back to lift the tumbler off of its rear bearing, probably about 3 inches up, and then we can get this out. And this again is on a Frigidaire Gallery dryer. So when we get the tumbler out, we can see that there's a lot of dirt in there, a lot of lint, even some burnt lint that shows that there was a fire at some point. And we want to get rid of all this. This is probably not after a year, this is probably after about maybe 6 years. So we're just going to lift up on all the lint we can reach. And I have one of those duster things, really helps to kind of speed it up. Again, you can use a vacuum. Some people use compressed air. You do want to probably wear a mask when you do this, so you don't inhale any of the little particles. So, and this is an electric dryer, so it has this electric coil or spring, and that's where a lot of the heat is and where the fires can start. So you want to make sure that area is really clean. This particular dryer kept cutting out maybe about 3/4 of the way through the cycle. It would just stop, and that was because the motor would overheat, and the motor was overheating because it was surrounded by a whole bunch of dog fur and dryer lint. So I'm just using this little brush, like an old toothbrush, to reach in all the little nooks and crevices that I can find to clean out that lint. And again, I've seen some people use compressed air, like air in a can would work, or if you have a really nice vacuum cleaner with a small attachment, you can do it. I've sped up the camera here a little bit just to spare you time, but I'm trying to get in to to every area that I can see where there's lint, and this one was just packed with the dog fur and lint. There's a big chunk, and that really makes it hard for that dryer to stay cool enough. And the dryer has a protective device, a thermal cutout, so when it gets too hot it'll just shut off and then it'll reset, but it stops the cycle and you'd have to restart the cycle, and more importantly it could cause a fire. So I'm also getting inside the blower housing. If I see any lint, I'm just going to pull it out. I'm going to clean the front panel, especially where all the electronics are, because they can get hot. And this will probably take you 20 to 30 minutes. You'll be done, and you could do it every year. It would be great, but even if you did it every other year, you're going to be fine. The dryer vent tube should be done more often, and again, especially if it goes over 20 feet, because the fan is not designed to blow the air that far, so a lot of that lint just gets stuck in there. It's kind of like arteriosclerosis. The tube gets smaller and smaller and smaller and becomes unable to get rid of all the heat and the moisture from the dryer, so the dryer just takes forever, uses a lot more energy, and increases the chance of a fire. So the main thing I'm really targeting here is this motor, and in particular all the areas around the front and back. The back area is where the little cooling fins are, and they're responsible for spinning and keeping the dryer cool. So we got a little bit in there. That's where the rear bearing sits. Sometimes when you have this out, it's good to put a little grease in that cup, that plastic cup where the rear bearing sits, to help lubricate it. It has to be what's called a high temperature type of grease because it gets a lot of friction. There's this vent here on the back of the dryer, and that's a good thing to clean up too. Oh, there's the little fins, we saw them spinning. I'm going to put it back together. I got to make sure the spring is attached to the idler wheel and then attached down to the frame here below the idler wheel. Mine had come loose, and yours it may not be loose, but if you pull to the left you should feel spring tension. When you put the belt back on, you're going to be pulling it to the left and then feeding the belt onto the smaller pulley on the motor. So I'm going to get this tumbler in. I'm going to lift it up a little bit in the back so it can then sit down onto the rear bearing, and then I'm going to spin the tumbler a little bit to make sure it is on the bearing and that it can turn pretty easily. Then I'll reach in and I'll pull that, put the belt over the idler wheel, I'll pull it to the left and then feed the belt over the smaller pulley. When I spin the tumbler, if the fan spins, I know the belt is on. And I want to rotate this at least a full revolution before I put it together to make sure the belt is in the right position. So I'm going to put the front panel back on by putting it down onto its bottom clips first. And then once I have them in position, I'll close it. I'll make sure that the cables on the upper right hand side are fed into the cabinet and not being pinched. And then I'm going to reach in and lift up on the tumbler a little bit so it can then sit down on the bearing that's connected to the front panel. So I have to lift up a little bit, and then I'm going to push in that panel. I have to add those two little Phillips head screws and reconnect the modular connector. Just make sure I put those all the way in. Nice tight electrical connection. Tighten up the Phillips head screws, and I can close down the top panel, and we're really done. Plug it back in, make sure it's working, and that's it. So hopefully that'll help you to keep your dryer nice and clean and save you some energy and also prevent any chance of a fire. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe when you get a chance. Thanks again.